Hey, today I wanted to talk about the state of the gaming industry and how many games nowadays are considered not to be feature complete. They are considered not to be ready to even play with them. And there has been a lot of backlash in different media, Twitter amongst them, and also YouTube, with lots of content discussing the status of these games and the industry in general. One of the main complaints that I have been hearing is that many of these games are not feature ready. They mean that parts of this game, or even the whole game in some cases, basically are not ready to start or to be used. And this is not just a topic that has been discussed by regular gamers, but it also has been discussed by many of the most popular streamers out there, like us Mongold. So if you are new to the channel, my name is Juan. I'm a product leader and I have been working in tech companies building software products for over 20 years now. I have to say, I don't work in gaming industry, but there are many similarities of how gaming industry or gaming companies work and what software companies or software product companies do. So I'm going to talk about the experiences that I have in software companies and how they are very similar to the situation that is happening right now in the gaming industry. So let me introduce one topic to you first. If you're not familiar with software and how softwares are built, let's talk quickly about what a minimum viable product is, or an MVP. An MVP was introduced by Eric Ries in the book The Lean Startup. The Lean Startup basically talks about how startups should try to find the correct product for their customers as soon as possible. What is known usually to find the correct product market fit. You want to make sure that you are able to find that group, that market, that group of people that have a problem that your product can solve. The reality is that it's never that obvious, and many companies, what they have done in the past is that they spend a lot of time trying to build that perfect product for that problem. But because it's an exploratory journey and you don't really know what the customers need until they really start using it, many times there were problems. What you end up building is not something that your customers need. So having a collaboration with your customers or those potential customers and building those products together with them by creating these minimum viable products that you deliver regularly to them, and it goes growing in features, functionality, and more benefits for the customer, then that's the proposal from Eric Ries, which in practice makes a lot of sense because you're working together with your customers, so you're building the product that they need. Ideally, not just with one customer, but a bunch of them. This is something that some companies have done very successfully, even in gaming. You can see nowadays, Baldur's Gate 3, it has been a really huge success. They also were in a beta period for 3 years, which means that they had been developing with customers, the gamers, if you are one of them, together, meaning that at some point you have been giving feedback to them and they have adapted the product so it actually fulfills the expectations that the customers will have, in this case the gamers. So now the problem comes in how what people understands for this minimal viable product. This is a very common concept in software companies. Some companies will say that a minimum viable product is just a set of features that you just give out to your customers and then they can start using them. But in some cases, they ignore things like usability and stuff like that. So they don't make it necessarily very appealing. They just want to validate that how I'm solving the problem is the correct way that the customers expect it to be solved. And this is kind of okay if you are in a very early stage prototype phase. So doesn't mean that it's not valid. Then, of course, there's the other part of building these MVPs or these minimum valuable products, where you actually start to look more into just not having the functionality, but also that it's reliable, stable, that it can be used, and that also has an appeal already for the customers. Even if it's not ready, you could argue that most of the products out there are not ready at any point, except some games. Of course, they should be kind of ready. If you think about movies as products, they should be ready, of course, as well. But there are other games that are changing over time, like World of Warcraft has been changing over time, and every iteration is something new, and they are changing all the time. And yeah, I don't want to go into the discussion if it has been getting better or not. that could be another video on its own. So many people have been talking about this new way of defining the minimum viable product, sometimes as the minimum lovable product, which is a little bit, kind of a that kind of name. But it actually it implies that people actually had to like what you're building, which is something that I tend to agree. And there's times for different things. There's moments, especially if you are in a prototype phase when you're with a very few selected potential customers, building just very basic prototypes to validate certain assumptions and get feedback on them. That should be fine. When you start to give it to wider audiences, then you certainly have to pay attention on how it's going to be used, if people are going to enjoy it, what is going to be the experience that is reliable and is not breaking apart when they start using it. And I'm pretty sure that, for example, in the case of Baldur's Gate, when they went out with the beta, they already have quite many of these things. But of course, there were still quite many bugs that they were ironing. I'm pretty sure that during 3 years, they were not just ironing bugs. I'm pretty sure that there were many features that were not completely ready and they were building over those 3 years. So now that I have defined what a minimal viable product is, what has happened in the software industry, let's go back to the gaming industry in a moment, is that different companies have understood this differently. Some companies think that a minimum viable product is that you have a feature that kind of works, and because it kind of works and it solves a couple of cases, I just throw it out there and give it to my customers. But because maybe I'm a little bit scared of me talking that it's not completely ready and that it's not supporting all the cases and all the things that it should do, I should just maybe not mention that and just give it out and just pretend that everything works. This is something that has happened relatively often with software companies. And then, of course, when the customers figure out they're really not happy and then they start to complain, which is kind of normal. Of course, you know the cases, there's some minimal viable product that comes out and you know that it's not going to be ready for doing everything, and you know that it's going to have limitations because they will even tell you the company. And then you're probably quite okay with start using that product because you know that it's a really good product for you, serves your needs, gives you value, and then you can adopt it. And you could say that a minimum viable product is something that Tesla is doing with the self-driving and with the autopilot, starting with very small features or set of features in the beginning where it was helping you to keep the distance, to change lanes when you put the indicator, and very basic stuff, all the way to where they are now, where they're actually testing that a car can fully drive on its own, at least in certain areas. Again, it's yet another aspect or a type of MVP. It's not yet completely there. It's not like you can just throw the car and start driving whatever dirt roads and normal regular roads, city, highway, whatnot. That's not yet there. And you could argue that what they're building now is yet another MVP of that full self-driving. But it does a lot of things and they tell you already what it does and maybe what it does not. That's, in my opinion, what a full self, oh, sorry. That's, in my opinion, what a minimum viable product should be. And as you can imagine, for every example of a company that is doing it well, there's probably 9 companies that are doing it wrong, because this usually happens for all the cases. Maybe it's more like 2 and 8 doing it wrong, but something like that. You know that most of the companies are not going to be that great and they are not going to be so focused on bringing the solutions and the value to the customers. They're just going to try to rush out things to them, try to charge for them, obviously, and then try to put them in the revenue so they can be then reported whenever there's a new quarter, so on. So if they're publicly traded companies, that goes into the revenue, growth, that's what they care. And now going back to the gaming industry. So because games are software and software products, the reality is that the practices of software products like Agile, like Lean Startup and building MVPs is also something that is present in the gaming industry. And it's completely fine and should be done. And I think that is completely correct that companies are doing this. But of course, they had to do it right. They don't just had to just build a set of features, and because we have a hard deadline, we just release them and we'll fix it later. But that's not what people want. I mean, people don't want that you release a product, and especially a game that you would expect that it's something that they can start playing with, that they can use and that they can already enjoy. In that case, they should build a game that on its own it's contained and people can actually enjoy and play with it, even if there might be things that are coming in the future. I think that that's completely okay. This would be, for example, a little bit like what they have been complaining with Baldur's Gate 3. Act 3 is not great, it's all broken, blah blah blah. Well, maybe the people at Larian made a little bit of a mistake releasing that one a little bit too early. And maybe they should have released the first two and then bring the other one month later. Something like that. Something that you could tell people that, hey, we are working in closing the next one if they want to keep a very hard deadline. Although I think that they have been working quite much now in building new or fixing the problems that they have been. I don't know where is it. I have been playing a little bit, so I'm not an expert, so I cannot tell really that well. I've noticed some problems here and there, nothing major, at least not at this point. But then if you think about how you could build an MVP, is like I think that you could think about an MVP that is built like I was showing in that pyramid. You're just bringing chunks of that pyramid that are adding basically in all the horizontal layers. So you are not just ignoring all of them. The problem is that some companies they just maybe are having or focusing too much on the feature side, maybe not even having them already. Maybe the story is lacking. In some cases, the story can be there, but maybe the features are lacking. So basically, they don't have a way of defining or planning the product in a way that when they plan the chunks of the product, they are contain chunks of that product, contain, let's say, acts of the game that could be played and that could be enjoyed. So if you have to have something like, I don't know, like whatever they are using in Baldur's Gate to actually execute and plan the fights, that's something that you had to have ready, most likely to a very high level of degree. It might be that you don't support certain type of weapons because you will add them later, or certain type of magic or whatnot, or certain type of characters. But for the characters that you are supporting, the ways of fighting or the creating the spells should be ready and should be able to be shipped to the customers so they can start playing with them. The problem is that now I think that it's not clearly defined what are those chunks, those what usually is called an epic in the software industry. I'm not completely sure how they are called in the gaming industry, but if you think about an act in the games, you should have that act ready to be enjoyed, and maybe don't try to rush all the way to all the acts that that game is going to have, and just maybe deliver them separately. So I know that if you're watching this video, and especially if you work in gaming industry, you might not agree at all with what I've said here, because as I say, I don't work in gaming industry, but the reality is that I know that gaming industry works very similarly when it comes to processes and practices. If we ignore, of course, the whole part of storytelling, that's a very different story, and I had no understanding of that. I cannot tell how to do it. But the reality is that you should also be able to plan your work in chunks. The problem also for the gamers, and I think that this is what they don't realize sometimes, is that they're having expectation that when they hear about a new product, they expect that it's going to be the greatest product of the world. And that's not the reality of products. Most of the products that come out usually are not very good. And that's just the reality. There's just going to be always some outliers because we are not that great at working at being efficient and being good at planning and being good at delivering value to our customers, entertaining them, bringing value, solving problems, whatnot. Most of the companies are not that great. I think that maybe there's somewhere between a 10 to 20% that are quite good at what they're doing. Then there's going to be another chunks that are going to be competent and that they will deliver value to some degree. And then there's going to be a big tail of not that great performing companies. And the gaming industry is not going to be any different. And this is not to complain about gaming industry. This is a problem that is going to happen with all the products out there. Because no matter what industry, no matter what product you're using, there's going to be a few great products, and there's going to be a ton of other products that are somehow in the same competition area that they are not going to be something that you are even going to consider. Games, same problem. And yes, it is a problem. I think that in general, like culture, processes, a motivation of people, team building, having a good relation, a good culture in the company. I said it already, I know, but culture is something that is very important. If a good, correct culture is not instilled in the company, no company usually is going to work that well or not for a very long time. Anyways, no matter if you're person that works in gaming, a person that works with software companies, or if you're a gamer yourself, let me know in the comments below what are your thoughts. Be maybe diplomatic if you can, and at least respectful with each other, and let's not start a fight. If you enjoyed this video and want to know more about what MVPs are, how to define MVPs and how to build them, and what are the examples of how to do this, go check out this video. I will see you in the next one, and remember, stay safe.